I think I was 25 when I received Christ. Well, I was like 20 when I received Christ the first time, but I went to a church that taught me how to get saved every Sunday. So it never really taught me how to live. And so for 5 years, I was in torment because I loved God. I had a conscience now, but I didn't know how to live for God. And so I still lived how I lived before, and I was dying on the inside for 5 years.
You know, people have the tendency to think that a marriage doesn't take what it takes, and it takes more work and attention, just simple attention. You know, attention to the fact that, and he knows this about me, like when I get in the kitchen, if I don't really if I don't really answer, it's not that I'm not listening, but I'm really listening. So I'm scrubbing the counter, and like I know, sometimes I feel him watching me because I've been in the same spot for like 15, 20 minutes. The counter got to be clean, or it's got a hole in it. If something happened, something happened. Okay, something happened. But that is my time.
That's prayer.
You know, that's my prayer time. So that's what I'm doing when I'm cooking. But I get the opportunity to watch him spend time with God. When I wake up in the morning, my husband is in his spot, worshiping, praying, silent. That's what he's doing. And I think if he weren't doing that, I wouldn't have the respect for him that I have, because I need to see that in order to be able to emulate that. So I should be getting my texture of how my life is to be lived by seeing the example before me every day. So if he's not doing it, he's not covering his house right. He is doing it, so his house is covered, because I can see it and repeat it. So I love, you know, getting up in the morning and saying that. Like, I don't know, can't remember how long ago it was, but one morning I got up and he wasn't in prayer. I didn't know that he had been up since like 2. So he was finished with prayer. I was like, what? What's going on?
Well, you know, sometimes, you know, God wakes me up, Holy Ghost wakes me up around 4 o'clock in the morning, and I, you know, go off to myself and do whatever I'm going to do. And that's kind of like the norm of how it works. It's normally about that 4 o'clock time, but every once in a while, I don't know what God is thinking, but he wakes me up around 2, and I'm wide awake, and it's like, I'm spending time, you know, it's your body does it less it dies, you know, and it's always a wonderful thing. But you know, when you've been up that long, you know, people are waking up having their day. My day has already been going on for a while.
For a while, nobody recognizes that this man's been up.
You know, my wife and I, you know, before we got together, you know, when it comes to our family and what we come from, before we got together, I was married for 16 years. You know, and I had 2 children before that, you know, out of wedlock. I had 2 children with my wife, and it wasn't until I think I was 25 when I received Christ. Well, I was like 20 when I received Christ the first time, but I went to a church that taught me how to get saved every Sunday. So it never really taught me how to live. And so for 5 years, I was in torment because I loved God. I had a conscience now, but I didn't know how to live for God. And so I still lived how I lived before, and I was dying on the inside for 5 years. And so at the end of those 5 years, I went to a what's called Models for Christ, which is a program up in New York. I was living there at the time, and I met Christ for the first time and got converted and received the Holy Spirit and all those things. And it changed me forever, and it impacted me drastically. I turned from one man to the next, and it also took a toll on my marriage, because that's not what, you know, she would say, I didn't sign up for this. You know, this is not what she was, and I understood that, and I don't blame her for that. You know, we were, you know, thick as thieves in sin prior, and so now she lost her sin partner. and I gained another partner, which was Christ, and so that kind of made things kind of fall out of sorts at a certain point in time, and this is like years later in California that things just kind of fell out of sorts, and so I found myself by myself, divorced, not knowing what I was going to do next, and prior to that I was her son's godfather. And so while
Quite a story.
It's quite a story. I'm telling you,
Quite
we
a
don't have
story.
enough time. This is one of the things that we want to tell the story, the real story, one day in picture form. And so I was her son's godfather, and I hadn't seen them for 6 years.
6 years,
for
almost 6 years. Yeah.
And so I'm divorced. I'm in the back room of a woman who was on welfare. You talk about taking a dive. I had taken a dive, lost everything, which also had to do with me walking away from Hollywood. That's another story. And so, we've been able to watch God kind of, interweave all of that. And all of it hasn't been, gravy. It hasn't been all honey and cream and whatever, peaches and cream. It's had its issues,
But I think it's our perspective.
Yeah.
Even within the issues, it's been our perspective is that we believe what God has said to us about our marriage and about our children. So we don't pull off of that.
Yeah.
And and I'll say this for me, at the moments where I wanted to just blubber cry, he would look at me and say, "What did God say?" And I'd be like, "Okay, I didn't want you to say that at that moment, but okay." And then, I'd say, "Okay, you're right. I'm good. And I'd wipe my tears away. It's a process. It's a growing. It's a heart tug. It's a pull. But I believe God. We believe God, period. So there is no going back to put a comma.
And the thing about it is that we're watching God be faithful.
He's so faithful.
He's again, children. When they come back and how they come back and how they talk and how they remember certain things that didn't quite happen that way. But okay, and so you're loving on them, and we're watching God bring that all back together and weave it. One of our sons asked me, Dad, if you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently? And it kind of, we've all heard those thoughts, you know what I'm saying? And so it set me kind of into a path of really asking myself that question. And so I wrote a book on it. And it's called A Good Man, because I got it from the scripture, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And so I took it out of that, but also I dealt with it as me not only speaking to myself if I were younger, but also speaking to them. And I call it A Good Man, a child's I coulda, woulda, shoulda story. And so the whole point is to have parents connect and covenant with their children to bring them to a place of them having a better life than what they did. So let me tell you all of my mistakes. Let me tell you all of what I wish I would have known, what would have changed everything. And let me give you all these points. And now you can do them at your own pace, but the bottom line is here's 21 of them. And learn from them, grow from them, and you're going to have your own, but you shouldn't have to make my mistakes. Right. My part as a parent is to make sure that you don't make my mistakes. And so, we wrote that book, and we've been able to talk to them through those things, And so it's very powerful to see them them understand that they're involved in that process happening, because we're also open and answering their questions and showing them that no, we've made mistakes. But again, when I was a child, thought as a child, spoke as a child, when I became a man, I put away all these things. And what you're seeing now is a man who has put away these things. And sometimes, as you're still being a child, you don't necessarily understand the things that he's put away. But if you will do them today, you'll be further than I am when you're my age. And that's really what we're trying to get to them.
Yeah. It's been exciting to watch them have their aha moments, because now they're adults and they're having aha moments and calling us and saying, "I remember when you said this. I remember when you said this." And now, they're having children and we get to grab them and and they're like,
"Oh, good
you
stuff.
didn't do that with us." And we're like, "We know." They're special.
Grandbabies.
So that's been really cool. And to just see, all of our children are in some fashion within the arts community.
The arts community making a difference, making an impact. They all have this centeredness of rightness. It's funny because
And social justice.
Social
Every
justice.
single one of them.
Another one. One of our children. I mean, he was raised up in the house with us and everything else. He's seen everything that God has done even to this point, and it's just been colossal. Yeah. And so he goes. We hear him on the phone with his friends. No, you ought to do this. You should do this, because if you do this, you do that. And we're like, who is this? Who is this kid? He knows, he has so much wisdom for his age. Yeah. But at the same time, of course, now you watch him sometimes either follow it or not follow it. Yeah. And you have to breathe and know that God is still in control. They are so much better. Personally,
oh my God,
they are so much better than what I was at that age.
I'm going to go along with you on that. Than we were at that age. Yes. They are so much better. They started off on a higher plane.
Wisdom, understanding. And even when they don't understand why they should or understand why they know, they find themselves being pulled by God in a certain direction. Because I know that it was my mother instilling those verses of scriptures inside of me that really saved me, because there was always a point that I would not go beyond. I just could not go beyond, and it's because something that she did withheld, and I see that happening in all of their lives as well.
One of our sons says, well, if I don't know how to treat a woman, I wasn't watching Dad. Now, that I love, because that's really super, super important to me, that he knows, pull out the chair and be kind. And he has said to me, Dad, he did that, and that's the answer. He did that. So that they see things, and they watch from the time they're little to the time they're young adults, and all of that pouring into them isn't coming out of our mouths; it's coming out of our actions.
Yes.
And I think that we can't forget that as parents. Our children will always watch, and they'll duplicate what they see, not what we say. That's just mumbo jumbo until they become parents.
And have children.
God is love, and love comes from God. In 1 John, the Bible tells us that God is not only all-loving, but that He actually is love itself. The heart of the Parent Compass television show is to bring the transforming love of God to families everywhere. In every Parent Compass episode, true stories reveal family struggles and how their lives were radically changed by the love of God. Parent Compass, an award-winning television series, is completely funded by people like you. If you have been touched by God and you want to share God's love to others, would you please pass it on? Jesus tells us to go into all the world and to tell about Him. With your donation, you allow us to take this television show into many different nations and in many different languages, free of charge. And a portion of your donation goes to Parent Compass Outreach to feed starving children. Your gift does so much. To make your tax-deductible gift, go to parentcompass.tv/donate. That's parentcompass.tv/donate. And thank you for sending love and hope around the world.